Welcome to this house of memory and hope, where we always remember what was, we look very closely at what is, and we imagine what will be. We turn aside this morning from an unquiet world, seeking rest for our spirits and light for our thoughts. We bring our wounds to be healed, our hopes to be renewed, and our better selves to be quickened. From the world of many things and many doings, we come to seek the unity of a constantly loving spirit. We are divided within ourselves by many cares, by many pleasures, by diverse and sometimes selfish aims. And the majesty of the world bewilders our minds. Temptations and perplexities break us asunder. Tragedies small and great tempt our faith. Yet in all the universe there is no wholly severed thing, for all things are part and substance of the other. Nor can any one of us find alone a separate good, bound as we are to one another. With faith in one another, with faith in the infinite possibilities of love, with gratitude for all blessings known and unknown, remembered and forgotten, we give thanks for this amazing day. We live, we laugh, we cry, we love. And whoever you are on your life's journey or wherever you are welcome to accompany us on this fabulous, magnificent journey. The first days of August are the official beginning of my second year here as your interim minister. Yes, it's actually been a whole year so far, and much has happened, much good has happened among us, I think, and you all are both the beneficiaries and the way those good things have happened over this year. And now we look at what will happen in the future, including what might happen in the future, and including what we surely hope won't happen in the future. In truth, Live Oak Unitarian Universalist congregation is evolving. As I have often said, we are in the process of moving from what was to what will be. And in the middle of all that is what is. In this sense, we are becoming something rather than something other than what we are right now. That doesn't mean that we're changing the nature of our existence, what we might call our congregational DNA. If anything, as we become more true to that core identity. And we are changing. The important message is that we are not just becoming, we are not just being, we are becoming. And becoming means being that's not done yet. There's still more to happen. Last week here at Live Oak, we hosted an historic ceremony, a wedding ceremony, the first one in this place, the first one in the whole county that included a gay minister and his spouse. And by making this public declaration, a prophetic declaration, I would say, Live Oak is becoming a more audible voice of the conscience of this community. We are assuming our magnificent Unitarian Universalist heritage of religious humanism. And as a congregation and as a voice of reason, we are not just existing here. We are not just being here. We are becoming. At first glance, the difference between being and becoming may seem insignificant, And that is, of course, what this sermon's about, the monumental differences between those two notions. Most of us use the word becoming as an adjective. Oh, that's a becoming outfit you have on. And what we are saying is the outfit fits you. It is becoming of you. And it is appropriate to you in some way. We are saying in that outfit, you look the way you ought to look, the real you, which is very good. On another level, the word becoming is a philosophical term about which much has been said, especially in the theological world in this last century. The notion of becoming has actually spawned an entire system of thinking called process theology. We Unitarian Universalists have been closely identified with this idea. Its primary articulation came from Alfred North Whitehead, one of the great thinkers of our time, and someone who, along with his famous student, Bertrand Russell, was also associated with Unitarian thinking at the beginning of the last century. He was greatly influenced by Darwin and the idea of evolution, which Whitehead applied to philosophical thinking. The world is in process, he said, and so is God in process. And he defined God as the coordination of many individualities that are personal. Furthermore, whatever is of value in the experiences of an individual person, Whitehead believed was saved by entering into the experience of God's subsequent nature. That is, we became divine. We become divine. A quality derived from a person's life and purified in the harmony of God's existence, said Whitehead, contributes to the good, to the world forevermore. Of course, this theology is heresy, according to orthodoxy anyway, but we Unitarians have always loved controversy, so we're right in the middle of it. As a matter of fact, Unitarian Universalists don't usually even speak of theology, which literally in the Greek means the study of God. We do not possess a systematic theology as most Christian groups do, and also others. We have believed that theology is a personal matter. It's up to the individual to think about, and we honor this individual search. And we have set up ourselves as a religious community which supports that investigation, but does not constrict it. Theology, for most of us, is not the issue, and it certainly is not why we're sitting in this room this morning. Nevertheless, from a philosophical standpoint, most of us would be considered process people. If someone outside of us were willing to give us a name, which they're not, in traditional circles, the study of existence or being is called ontology. Process theology is simply the combination of ontology and evolution. Process theology is a term applied to those philosophies which stress becoming rather than being. There are also some Christians who identify themselves as process thinkers. The most famous advocate was the heretic Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who preached a modern form of Christian theism which takes science into account, especially the knowledge of evolution, and which teaches that God's way of working in the world is a slow process, patiently overcoming the elements of change and evil present in the universe, including in itself all the good that is brought about. The emphasis is on God's involvement rather than self-sufficiency, God's love rather than omnipotence. He wrote, "Something is afoot in the universe. A result is working out, which can best be compared to a gestation and a birth, the birth of a new spiritual reality formed by souls and the matter they draw after them. Laboriously, by way of human activity, and thanks to it, the new earth is gathering, isolating, and purifying itself. No, we are not like flowers in a bunch, but the leaves and flowers of a great tree, on which each appears in its time and its place according to the demands of the all. Process philosophy is characterized by its emphasis on becoming and on relationships. It stands in contrast to those philosophies that give primacy to being and absoluteness. This is why it makes a huge difference how we translate that story in the Bible of Moses talking to the burning bush. Remember when Moses asked whose voice was commanding him to do these things? When Moses asked the voice to name the one who was sending him into the land of Egypt, the voice answered with that famous line, and I think maybe one of the most important lines in the Bible, which says, "Tell them I am that which I am." Being itself. Western culture has embodied this great phrase into its essence, the great I am. I exist. And this absolute notion of the immutable existence of God has been the basis for at least three of the great religions on earth: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all of which more or less begin with that statement. And this statement defines being. But the interesting thing is that the more accurate translation of the Hebrew is the voice which says this: I am becoming what I am becoming. God is in process, just as Whitehead proposed. The elemental of existence of all that is in flux. It changes, it grows. What an amazing and appealing idea. And just like these little oak trees, tomorrow they will be different than they are today. And 10 years, as Aidan said, they will be different than they are today. They're growing, they are moving, they are becoming an oak tree in its full and most important meaning and essence. What an amazing and appealing idea that is, especially when we think about our spiritual selves. It is, of course, an idea which has much appeal for Unitarian Universalists, for it tends to be less absolutist. And for us, absolutism is something we really want to avoid. We feel that it has caused great injury in the world. Injury in so many ways, from absolutist religious philosophies to absolutist government philosophies. We are more situational in our thinking. And the idea of evolution, of course, has enormous interest for us because it is a scientific theory based on empirical evidence. In other words, evolution is a reasonable explanation of the existence of the world and of our existence in the world. Thomas Berry, the great modern philosopher, said, "We see the universe more as a cosmogenesis than as a cosmos. We perceive a long sequence of emergent creative activities over vast periods of time leading up to our present, and we see ourselves in a clearly defined mode of being and functioning, what we might call becoming." The notion of process is actually an ancient one. There is an interesting conjecture that Moses, who was the one who heard that mysterious voice, actually came up with the idea of monotheism when he was in Egypt, where the Bible indicates that he did grow up, and where he might have been a priest for the god Aten. Aten was declared to be the only god by the pharaoh Akhenaten. And interestingly, Akhenaten spoke of this god fashioning itself, evolving and growing. This was in Egypt 4,000 years ago. Unfortunately, Akhenaten's religion died, and when he died, and afterwards the old Egyptian polytheism renewed itself. Later, Greek philosophy tended to deprecate the notion of becoming and exalt instead being. The Greeks believed that what was altogether immutable or unchangeable, and hence immune to the influence of others, and especially human beings, was superior to that which in any way changed and depended upon other things. God, of course, would be absolutely independent. As we all know, most Western cultures are based on these ideas from the Greeks. However, in another early tradition, which espoused a philosophy of becoming, was Buddhism. Becoming for Buddhists is the universal form of reality. The Buddhists also speak of dependent origination of all things. One can find these ideas in the religions of ancient India also. But we are most influenced by the Greeks, and nearly all the great approved fathers of the church were heavily influenced by Aristotle. There were heresies, though, and the most interesting heresies for you use came from the philosophy of a 16th century theologian named Faustus Socinus, a man first squarely faced the built-in conflict between the religious doctrine of an all-knowing God that predominated by Greek absolutism, and Socinus rejected the unchangeability of God by taking on the reality of becoming, something which he said he could plainly see in his own life. Socinus was a champion of the idea of human freedom and free will, which he thought to be incompatible with the current belief then about God's foreknowledge of future events. Socinus believed that events, at least those events which are free acts, come into being and are created at a given time. To know them beforehand, even more to know them eternally, is a logical absurdity, and yet the Christian world of his day entirely believed the Calvinist doctrine of predestination and predetermination. If we grant freedom to humankind, Goethe said, there is an end to the omniscience of God. For if divinity knows how I shall act, I must act so perforce. Thus, Socinus indicated a real change in the nature of God's knowledge, one which would harmonize with the becoming and creation of things to be known. Incidentally, even though we were first called Unitarians over 400 years ago, for many years we were far more commonly known as Socinians. In the history books, Socinus is often called the father of modern Unitarianism, and he taught a major heresy, which was this: that Jesus saves humanity not by dying on the cross, but by setting an example for people to follow. From a process standpoint, Socinus taught that one's living, not what one believes, was the important feature of one's life. And in this sense, we can see that process philosophy fully throughout is nothing less than creation spirituality. 3,000 years of speculation have led to this result. Creativity, if real at all, must be universal and not limited to God. We were created supposedly in the legends in the image of God, and that is, whatever God is, the creation becomes. And so one part of that becoming is how it is that we create the world. We are creators of the world right along with the original creation. Charles Hartshorne is a Unitarian and one of the most prominent of process theologians. He called the doctrine contributionalism, that we contribute to the all. Individual existence is nothing more or less than a contribution to the future world society, the entire life and value of which is destined to be appreciated and enjoyed forever. And all the great ad campaigns have a slogan, and here is, I think, a good slogan for process theology. The many become one and are increased by one. So what does this oak tree look like? What is an oak tree? It is a becoming entity, becoming, being born again and again, day after day. And Unitarian Universalism is a becoming religion. It suits us, it fits us. Our Unitarian ancestors have described this dynamic condition variously. L.B. Fisher wrote in 1921, Universalists are often asked us to tell where they stand. The only true answer to give to this question is that we do not stand at all. We are always on the move, on the march. And what a becoming group of people you are on this morning. A congregation as a community is one of the most becoming phenomenon in our world today. And last Saturday, when you all came together to make a prophetic announcement to the world that we are becoming more than we were, I felt deep within me